Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, joined by my good friend, the great Johnny Shop. We've been doing this for almost a decade and a half. Actually, this is our 15th season, John. Decade and a half, and we go at it. It's game day, a lot of stuff going on in Dallas tonight. But, John, we got so many topics. We love to go around the NFL. But the first one I want to talk to you is one that is so Raiders centric. And then we're going to branch off into stuff that impacts the Raiders, but not necessarily Raiders centric. But that is when you look at Josh McDaniels, he's got multiple Super Bowl rings. I knew him back in East Lansing when he coached with Michigan State. He goes to Denver as a young guy, very arrogant. Now, his dad is, if there was a Mount Rushmore of high school coaches, would be on it. He's a legend. So he gets raised in a football family by one of the best football savants that there are, his dad. Then he gets to go coach with one of the best coaches of all time in Bill Belichick. And so at a young age, who wouldn't have had too big of an ego? I would have. And I admit that. And it's just the reality of the situation. And so he fails miserably at Denver, and it was his fault. Period. Now, do I think the media was unfair with him? Yeah. Not unfair with his failure, but he also didn't treat him well. And if you don't treat him well, they're going to pounce when they can pounce. So I'm putting it all on Josh. But he goes back. He continues to succeed with Belichick, gets his chance here. Now, I understand, you're not here, but Raiders, first of all, hate the Patriots. They absolutely hate them. I mean, with the same disdain that Spartans have for Wolverines. It's that intense. They hate them. So that was the first strike. Then the second strike is, they remember the Tuck rule, all that, the Tuck rule game, all that. So my point is I don't think you can make a judgment about whether or not Josh McDaniels is a good coach now. Now, let me just say this, an educated one. You can look at what he did at Denver, and he's a failure, but so was Belichick in Cleveland. So was, it wasn't like the big tuna always succeeded in his career either. But if you want to make a judgment on Vegas, I mean, anyone's allowed to make any judgment that they want. I wouldn't tell them they couldn't, but in my mind, I don't think you can make a fair one yet. What do you think?
A couple things. First of all, like you talked about, it's not only that Josh McDaniels was a bit of a prodigy when he got to Denver, they got off to that super fast start. That did not help. To his credit, he owned doing some maybe crazy things in Denver that turned that south very fast. Because there was such a long break between that and his start as the head coach of the Raiders, that really is far separated. It's almost like a past life. So that's one thing. A second thing is we look at the history of the NFL, we go around it. How many guys really succeeded as head coaches on their second turn? For whatever reason, the NFL success load for second turn has been incredible. It's not just been Belichick. A lot of guys with their second chance have done really well, which surprises some folks. Sometimes you look around, you're like, why didn't that guy get a second chance? Why didn't Jim Fossil get a second chance? When it looked like he was going to be the coach of the then Redskins, that got all wild and wacky. So a lot of folks have really good success the second time. The third thing I think is looking across the sport, not just at the Raiders, not just at Josh McDaniels, I think you probably need something around 30 NFL regular season games to have an idea if a coach has it, if he doesn't, or if you're not sure. In reality, if you're not sure after 30 games, it's not a great sign. But I think you probably need 30 games or so. And I think you can tell more about coaches that are not taking over an incredible situation than you can by somebody who comes in when everything's going really well, like Barry Switzer did. If you recall the Cowboys' final Super Bowl when he was kind of in there, how could you who knows? You're in a great situation. So I would look at McDaniels seriously here in Las Vegas after about 30 games.
All right. I want to talk to you now about offensive rookie of the year. I know who I think it's going to be.
Who's that?
And then I want to talk about defensive rookie of the year. So offensive rookie of the year, I think it's going to be Bijan Robinson, the running back out of UT, out of the Longhorns. I think he is special. I think he's a Christian McCaffrey type player with his ability in the passing game and the running game. He's just not going to be one dimensional. I think he's the guy to beat, and the odds tell us that he is for offensive rookie of the year. Your thoughts?
That's a tough situation. You have a real uncertain situation with quarterback in Atlanta, and you're going to have a lot of eyes on Robinson. I understand what you're saying, and I see that athleticism. I actually think Jamar Gibbs has a better chance in Detroit. But there's two guys I like most. Jackson Smith and Jigba. Watch out. I think this is a guy that's going to take off. And I think Jordan Addison has a great chance to have a huge rookie year too, for a couple of big reasons. He's got a guy that's pretty good with the deep ball, pretty good passing at Kirk Cousins, and he's got probably one of the 5 best receivers in the sport lining up on the other side. So I look for Addison to get a lot of opportunities to throw and catch from Cousins without a whole lot of guys around him. But I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's going to be healthy. That's the guy I like most. I'm not trying to downplay Robinson or Gibbs and some of the other guys, but I think people are asleep on Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I think the Raiders tight end Michael Mayer is going to have a great season. I just don't think at tight end and with all these weapons, he's going to get enough touches to be considered for that. But he's going to be a guy. I've gone on national radio several times and talked about, this is a guy, if you're looking for a Steeler fantasy pick, he's it. All right, let's go the other side of the ball. Defensive rookie of the year. To me, I think there is one guy. And if I'm in Vegas, but I'm not Vegas. I don't know how the odds work, but he would be 1-1. I think he is such a favorite. Will Anderson of the Texans. This guy is an absolute game changer. He is intense. He's a terrific kid, hard worker. I think you've already seen it, but I think he is the young man to beat. Your thoughts on Will Anderson? If not, who do you think gets it?
I like that a whole lot. You look at Houston, they're starting over. They're starting from behind. Their head coach played on the defensive side of the ball. I think we're going to see him channeled through Will Anderson. Anderson knows his history a little bit. He knows J.J. Watt's been gone from Houston for a while, but there's still a shadow there. Mm-hmm. This is a guy with incredible pedigree. You know some guys that have worked with him and coached him. I think this is a straight shot, and this is going to be a developing leader that's going to do what he can to pull the Texans out of the drudge they've been in through the mid-2020s. I like Will Anderson completely. If for nothing else, that I'm pretty sure it may not even be to week 3 of the season when he's pretty clearly the best defender on that Houston Texans team. Will Anderson's going to be tough to
not already.
Exactly.
Man, he's been fun to watch in preseason. All right, I want to talk to you about a different subject now. Jerry Jeudy goes out. This is the 5th wide receiver in camp who has gotten sustained big-time injuries that could keep them out a long time. Huge loss. Another good guy, a good player, a good person. I hate to see guys injured. This is a real concern.
It's a huge concern, and it absolutely affects the Raiders because everybody knows they open with Denver. That game got substantially more likely to be won because of this injury. This is a humongous injury. When you look at what happened in Denver last year, it was a mess. You got Sean Payton in there, one of the great play callers in the modern time. I got a feeling that, 75% of his plays had Jeudy at least in mind or considered. This is a guy on the field that matters on every snap. This is a total reshuffling of the deck. We don't know how serious the injury is right now, but it doesn't appear that he's going to play in week 1. But it does bring up the interesting point that sometimes fans forget, but not people watching this show, of course. Pretty much everybody has a bye week before week 1. And surely that's going to help in this case. But I see this as a significant injury to the start of the Sean Payton era, to Russell Wilson's future. And for sure, the Raiders, in reality, they're looking like they can launch the season a whole lot better. I mean, you take the top receiver off anybody's team, that's going to make a difference. And this guy is a tremendous talent and speed. And when you saw him last year, you're just thinking they got to get this guy the ball as much as they can. And they couldn't even figure out when to call timeouts. That's not going to be the case this year. This is arguably the biggest injury of at least the late preseason, if not the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with you 110%. John, I want to stick on this mode for a minute. I think Sean Payton is a good offensive mind. I don't think he is a great coach like a Parcells at all. I don't think he's a Parcells. I don't think he's a Belichick. I don't think he's an Andy Reid. There are a bunch of, I think, when I think of A-tier coaches, I think of Jimmy Johnson, Bill Parcells, Andy Reid, those types of guys. I think he's a B-tier coach, so I think he's obviously good to be in the B tier. But I don't think he is there's a lot of woo in Denver, and I think you need to tap your brakes. Now, listen, nobody was going to be as bad as Nathaniel Hackett. He was terrible. And so I think there's an upgrade there. I think Hackett didn't know how to use Russell Wilson. So I think it hurt the team. I think Sean's going to know how to do it. But I don't get this. Okay, listen. If Sean Payton had went there last year, I think they would have been even more better, because I think Sean Payton is a good coach. I'm not saying I think he's a bad one. But these people acting like all of a sudden Denver's in the hunt to beat the Chiefs. Man, I don't know what you're drinking, but back away from it, because I don't think Sean Payton's that tier of a coach. Am I wrong?
I don't think so. I think Sean Payton has been very well promoted, arguably by some of the top information brokers inside of pro football. I do think
we all know how that happens.
Yeah, I think I think he's been a little overrated and a little over pushed as a head coach. Fine offensive mind. It's hard. You can't knock anybody that's won a Super Bowl, but I thought that it just always seemed like the Saints were a little bit overrated in what they were doing. And I know they're not.
How many times, John? How many times did they have teams that should have done more and didn't? Quite frankly, listen, I'm going to give the man all the respect. I think he's a B-tier coach. He's won a Super Bowl. I'm not disrespecting any of that.
No.
But there were a lot more years that when it was over, you thought, man, they underproduced than overproduced. And in fact, I'm going to go a step farther. I think Drew Brees made him significantly better than what he was.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot to that, because the situation in San Diego was strange. Brees is there. Another quarterback is drafted. Brees is significantly hurt. He's infamously somehow failed by the Dolphins doctor for a physical. It turned out that guy got it wrong a little bit. Would Sean Payton have been able to win much with an average to better than average quarterback? Or did he need one of the most accurate and one of the quarterbacks that had like the fastest CPU processor in his mind, and Drew Brees, who was of course trained in Joe Tiller's great spread system and just fast? I don't think so. At the same time, to be fair, if for some reason Sean Payton gets to or wins another Super Bowl, he has a chance to ascend, to increase to arguably the top tier. The way it went out, Cousins got him in overtime. It's funny. Every once in a while, there's somebody out there. I don't have to defend Kirk Cousins. Nobody does. Every once in a while, even there's some guys on TV like, I don't know if Cousins ever won a playoff game. It's like, that's funny. I know a lot of Saints fans that actually think that, they remember that he knocked them out when they were really expecting to make a Super Bowl run that year. So Sean Payton doesn't need the Broncos to build up his legacy. It's already arguably overinflated. But I don't know, and we don't know, why Sean Payton didn't take a job with a bigger upside. Whether that was the Chargers that everybody and their brother thought he would take, or whether he would sit another year. I think, as we've talked about here before, I think he is rolling the dice on whatever's left with Russell Wilson, whatever focus is left with Russell Wilson, which I am a doubter of. And if this does not go good for Sean Payton, he will absolutely diminish his legacy or his stature. So I hate to say it, but I'm kind of with you. I never understood why there's always so much Sean Payton chatter with the Giants and with the Cowboys. People always thought he's the Cowboys. We may look back on this one day and think that he had the right people promoting Sean Payton for a long time, more than the reality of the league, the people that own and run the league, thinking, hey, this is the guy to get us to the top. So last time I checked, there were a lot of head coaches hired between the time Sean Payton retired and the time he took the Broncos job. It's not like there was just one or two.
John, we've been doing this for 15 years. And you just made the best quote I've ever heard when you said, quote, I don't think Sean Payton needs the Broncos to enhance his legacy. I think it's already pretty overrated.
I do. And it's no knock on him. I don't think he's been like,
I think he's got a good agent.
PR firm. I think he's got a good agent. And I think we all know some of the information brokers that he's close to. But as his head coach and mentor would say, you are as good as your record says you are. He's got a really good record. It's not a Parcells record. It's not a top end record yet. But this looks like a risk and a roll of the dice here with Act Two. And man, if he pulls this off, he's gonna convince me. If he gets or wins another Super Bowl, it's more likely than not he's going to be elevated to that top shelf back there over my shoulder.
I agree with you. All right, I want to get into a subject that I think is really important. I love that the NFL. So the Raiders will play their last game tonight. Okay, great, wonderful, done. Then there's a long break. They let college football have the first weekend in September. And then they come in that second week in September. I think it's smart. You're letting bodies heal. You're giving your team a couple of weeks to relax, to get ready. I love it. I love it. I love it. I think it's smart of the NFL for a lot of reasons. Here's a couple. Tom Izzo, the Hall of Fame basketball coach at Michigan State, and I were having a conversation one time, and he was bemoaning the fifth foul in basketball. And he said, people come to watch the stars. Why does basketball put your stars on the bench? He says, give them 3 free throws and the ball, whatever. But you don't take stars out of the game. To me, the NFL giving this 2 weeks for guys to heal is so smart. I have my issues with the NFL, but man, they do a lot right. And this is one of them. Your thoughts?
It really is. And they did it really quietly. There was never like a big pronouncement of, oh, we're basically going to schedule the preseason such that everybody has a bye week before the season starts. But it's incredibly critical because everybody's been going at it for 5 weeks or so. Tough, hard. The Raiders are going to, next phase of their schedule is 12 weeks. It would be insane not to have a break. It's brilliant to have the break. It doesn't diffuse or eliminate the argument or the question of whether there should be a second bye week during the season. But it is very significant to give the bodies and the minds a significant amount of time to heal and dial up. It is also incredibly deferential and respectful to college football. It's tremendous. The first week, the Labor Day weekend, is a feature weekend for college football. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's even some on Sunday and Labor Day Monday. The NFL could crush that if they want to. It's a great thing for the sport of football across the board that they don't. And I think it's a better thing for the players that they have this time. I do not think that every single statistical injury report and analysis that the NFL office gets, they just throw out without reading. I think they at least in this day and age, consider and evaluate them. And this has got to be a decision that has 100% support across the sport. All it can do for fans is make us that much more excited that this thing is going to kick off on the coming Thursday night. All it does for your teams is a positive. Nobody's getting rusty after the end of the preseason. Hopefully they're getting healthy. And all eyes for now, Jerry Jeudy. All eyes are on Jerry Jeudy. Doesn't sound like he's coming back, but this is the kind of thing where it really matters.
All right. Last thing I want to talk about with you, because I think it's very germane, is back during COVID when they were going through the labor issues, NFL and the NFLPA did a 10-year deal. Now, I know there's a lot of angst among running backs, but the point of the matter is the NFL is the big dog. The only thing that can destroy the NFL is the NFL. I think this 10-year labor deal was brilliant. I am not a fan of DeMaurice Smith at all, the NFL, PA leader at the time. Not a fan of his at all. But if he's going to have any good legacy, I think this is going to be it. 10 years of labor peace. Allow these teams to just grow the game, no labor issues. I think this is huge for the National Football League. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's probably underrated how big it is in this kind of situation. If you're negotiating one of these deals, you probably want to err on shooting for longer than you think you could get or you want. There's a couple of reasons, and maybe there's some that we don't always think about, kind of like what we were talking about last week, maybe thinking of it a different way. The average cycle of an NFL player is still somewhere in the 3 to 4 year range, if that's right. So if you're starting with 10, you're considering that this labor agreement is going to extend long enough that you're going to have a couple of cycles of players in there. There's too much uncertainty and discomfort, if you will, with a short-term labor deal of like, say, 3 seasons. I mean, that's remarkably short. That's like a patchwork. And I don't think there's enough stability, even if it's maybe closer to 5 or 6. So I don't think the timing was an accident. I don't know that they would have gotten a 10-year deal in a different situation without a monstrous overhanging situation affecting all people on earth, let alone all professional football players. I hope it sets a standard, because just like, let's say you're an Atlanta Braves fan, when you have your core, your best players signed for 10 years, it feels different than if they're on a 3-year contract. The NFL players, that's not really going to happen. Even though Pat Mahomes' contract is super long and super large, it doesn't quite feel the same, because the nature of that sport is players are in and out quicker. But to know that the league has a labor agreement with the players that's that long, as we talked about before, I think it provides a generous ramp for things that should be considered, evaluated, and improved upon in the next agreement by both sides. And for fans, they don't have to worry about getting yanked around. And a good portion of the fans out there in professional sports today remember the baseball strike in the mid-90s that hurt big time, and remember the hockey strike or lockout that took that sport at a time when it was running neck and neck with the NBA off on a totally different path of relevance. There's not a lot of good that comes out of labor instability or a short labor deal, but there does appear to be a lot of good in a long-term labor deal. All that does is give people the chance to relax and with clear mind, thinking about what's in the best interest of the NFL, try to put ideas together. The people that are supposed to do it, that are paid to do it, et cetera, and thinking about it, that's only going to end up benefiting them versus trying to make a deal under pressure or having this cloud hangover that we can't get anything more than a 3 or 4 year deal. That's only one cycle of players. The players currently in the game are most interested in their best interest. They may not necessarily be thinking about the best interest of the next cycle of players or players, even down that road further, 6, 8, 10 years down the road.
Totally agree. He's the one and only John Shop. You can check his podcast out on the FFSN network, Spartan Pride Podcast. I'm Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, also part of the Fans First Sports Network. We'll see you all next time. Hope you enjoy the Raider game tonight.